My name is Rosalind Keaton, and I never thought I'd be telling a story like this. For 67 years, I've believed in kindness, patience, and the unbreakable bond between a mother and her child. But nothing can prepare you for the day you realize someone you welcomed into your family is quietly trying to erase you from it. You might actually regret missing out on this dramatic story. So before you sit down and listen, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to Grace's Truth. I still remember the day I first met Daniel, my daughter Emily's new boyfriend at the time. He had that perfect polished smile, the kind that could charm an entire room. Emily brought him over for dinner, saying she couldn't wait for me to meet the man who made her feel special. Daniel walked into my home carrying flowers and a bottle of wine, his handshake firm, his gaze unwavering. Everything about him screamed confidence, almost too much. As we sat at the table, he complimented everything: my cooking, my home, my career as a nurse before retirement. But there was something in his eyes that didn't match his words. It was subtle, but I caught it. A flicker of calculation, like he was already sizing up his place in our lives. Emily was glowing, her cheeks flushed with excitement, and I didn't want to be the cynical mother who questioned her happiness. So I smiled. I served dessert, and I told myself to trust her judgment. But even that night, there were small signs. Little things you'd miss if you weren't paying attention. He cut her off mid-sentence a few times, laughing over her story to tell his own. He brushed off her opinions with a charming, "Oh, Emily, you're so cute." It was the kind of behavior that might seem harmless in public, but sent a quiet chill down my spine. Over the next few months, Daniel became a permanent fixture in Emily's life. He was always around, always, the one making plans, deciding where they would go, what they would do. And slowly, I noticed Emily's calls became less frequent. Our weekly coffee dates turned into once a month, then every other month. Whenever I tried to make plans, Daniel somehow had other things scheduled. I told myself it was normal. Emily was in love, building her own life. That's what mothers want for their children, right? To see them happy, independent. But there's a difference between independence and isolation, and I was starting to sense which one this was. The night Daniel proposed, Emily called me sobbing with joy. I congratulated her, my voice trembling with both pride and unease. When she asked me to help plan the wedding, I said yes. Of course I would. But deep down, I felt like a guest, not a mother of the bride. On the day of the engagement dinner, Daniel's true colors peeked through. While everyone toasted the happy couple, he leaned toward me and said with that same charming grin, "Rosalind, I hope you're ready to give Emily some space. She's got a husband now. She won't need her mommy as much." I forced a laugh, but my chest tightened. The words were playful, but the message was clear. He didn't want me around. That night, lying awake in my quiet house, I stared at the ceiling and asked myself if I was imagining it. Was I just an overprotective mother who couldn't let go? Or was Daniel really trying to push me out of Emily's life? I didn't know it yet. But that engagement dinner was the first step toward one of the most heartbreaking, infuriating experiences of my life. And as much as I wanted to believe Daniel's intentions were good, I would soon find out just how far he was willing to go to cut me off from my own daughter, and just how far I was willing to go to fight back. The weeks after the engagement dinner felt different, heavier somehow. Daniel had made his intentions clear that night with that sly remark, and I couldn't shake the unease that gnawed at me. Still, I told myself to be patient. Emily deserved to enjoy her engagement without me clouding it with suspicion. I tried to be involved in the wedding planning, offering to help with the flowers, the guest list, even her dress shopping. But every time there seemed to be a barrier. "Oh, Mom, Daniel already booked someone for that," Emily would say lightly. Or Daniel thought it would be easier if we handled this ourselves. Bit by bit, I felt my role as mother of the bride shrinking into nothing. The final blow came when Emily told me Daniel wanted a smaller bridal party and suggested I not walk her down the aisle. I don't want it to feel too old-fashioned," Emily said awkwardly over the phone. Her voice sounded rehearsed, like she was repeating something Daniel had told her. I swallowed the lump in my throat and said, "Sweetheart, whatever makes you happy." But when I hung up, I sat there in my quiet kitchen staring at the cold cup of tea in front of me. For the first time, I felt like an outsider in my own daughter's life. Daniel's tactics became more obvious as time passed. Whenever I called, he was the one who answered. Emily's busy Rosalind. I'll have her call you back. She rarely did. When I suggested meeting for lunch, Daniel would chime in. Oh, we already have plans that day. At family gatherings, Daniel would monopolize every conversation. If I tried to talk to Emily, he'd interrupt with some joke dismissing my words like I was an overbearing parent who didn't know when to let go. I started to notice how Emily looked at me. Less, spoke less, deferred to Daniel's opinions. It was like she was slowly slipping away, and I was powerless to stop it. One Sunday afternoon, I stopped by their new apartment unannounced, something I'd never done before. Emily opened the door surprised but happy to see me. We sat on the couch talking quietly about wedding details, and for a moment, it felt like old times. Then Daniel came home. He froze in the doorway, his expression carefully neutral. Oh, Rosalind. Didn't know we had company today. I just wanted to drop something off for Emily, I said with a smile, holding up the little box of cookies I'd baked. Daniel's lips curved into a polite grin, but his eyes were cold. Next time, maybe give us a heads up. We've been really busy. Emily glanced at him nervously, and I felt the air shift like I wasn't welcome in my own daughter's home. That night, as I washed the empty cookie tin in my sink, I realized something horrifying. Daniel wasn't just trying to set boundaries. He was systematically cutting me out of Emily's life. The final confirmation came a week later when I overheard him on the phone. I'd stopped by to drop off a wedding invitation for a family friend who didn't have email. As I waited in the hallway for Emily to get her shoes, Daniel was in the kitchen talking quietly but sharply. She's too involved, Emily. You need to grow up and stop letting your mom control you. If you want our marriage to work, you can't keep running to her for everything. I froze, my heart pounding. Emily said nothing. When Daniel left the room, she finally looked at me, guilt flickering in her eyes. Mom, he wants us to have our own space. I nodded slowly, forcing a smile I didn't feel. Of course, honey. You're building your own life. But inside, something shifted. For months, I had hoped Daniel would grow kinder, that Emily would see through the cracks in his perfect facade. But now I knew, if I stayed quiet, I would lose my daughter completely. Still, I didn't argue. I didn't fight. I simply went home, sat in my favorite chair, and let the silence settle around me. It was in that silence that my resolve hardened. I didn't know exactly how yet, but one thing had become crystal clear. If Daniel wanted me gone, he was about to learn just how dangerous a quiet woman could be. The wedding day arrived faster than I could have imagined. Emily had always dreamed of a spring wedding, soft blossoms, a pastel palette, and the kind of sunshine that felt like a blessing. I wanted so badly for her day to be perfect, to be filled with nothing but love and joy. But even before I stepped foot into the venue, I felt the sting of exclusion. I arrived early, wearing the pale lavender dress Emily and I had chosen together months ago, back when she still looked at me as her best friend and not as some obligation. My heart swelled as I saw her in her gown. She looked radiant, like the little girl who used to run barefoot in our backyard, laughing without a care in the world. Mom, she said, rushing to hug me. For a brief, beautiful moment, it was just us again. Then Daniel appeared, and the moment shattered. Rosalind, glad you could make it, he said with that polished grin. His tone felt like a dagger hidden in velvet. I brushed it off, determined not to let anything ruin Emily's day. But as I looked around, I realized something was wrong. My name card for the ceremony wasn't with the family. It was tucked away at a table near the back, close to the catering station. Confused, I walked to the planner. Excuse me, I think there's been a mistake. This is the bride's mother. The planner checked her list. I'm sorry, ma'am. This is the seating arrangement the groom provided. It felt like a punch to the stomach. I stood there holding the little card with my name on it, heat rising in my chest. Guests passed by, oblivious to the humiliation blooming in my heart. During the ceremony, my view of my daughter exchanging vows was partially blocked by a decorative column. I could barely hear her voice as she promised forever to a man who was already chiseling me out of her life. The reception wasn't any better. The family photos, the ones every mother dreams of, were taken without me. I wasn't invited to the head table. When it was time for the speeches, Daniel gave a sugary toast about family, his arm wrapped around Emily while my glass of champagne sat untouched. I felt invisible, and yet through the pain I stayed silent, because this wasn't the moment to fight. When I got home that night, the house felt emptier than ever. I slipped off my shoes and sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the framed photos on my nightstand. Emily at her high school graduation, Emily holding her newborn niece, Emily, laughing on a summer day. Tears burned my eyes, but none fell. That night, I realized something fundamental. If I confronted Daniel now, he'd only tighten his grip on her. Daniel was clever. He didn't scream or insult me directly. His cruelty came in whispers, in quiet decisions that chipped away at my place in Emily's life. If I lashed out, he'd paint me as the overbearing mother who couldn't let go. No, I had to be patient. The weeks after the wedding were worse. Calls became rarer. Texts went unanswered. Emily always had plans when I asked to see her. Once, when I finally reached her on the phone, I heard Daniel in the background. "Why does she need to know everything we're doing?" Emily's voice was soft, almost pleading. "She's my mom, Daniel." But she didn't finish her sentence. That was the night I decided something had to change. I started paying attention. I noticed how Daniel controlled the conversation whenever we were together, how Emily's laughter didn't quite reach her eyes anymore. He spoke for her, planned for her, even ordered her meals at restaurants. I knew I couldn't just march in and demand my daughter back. That would only drive her further away, so I waited. I watched, and I began to make mental notes of every subtle red flag Daniel revealed. At first, I didn't know what I was looking for: proof, a mistake. But deep down, I trusted that men like Daniel always slipped up. They couldn't help themselves. And when they did, I'd be ready. After the wedding, Daniel's grip on Emily only tightened. Every time I tried to reach out, he was there like a gatekeeper, filtering what she heard, what she saw, and even what she felt. At first, I told myself to be patient. Newlyweds often get wrapped up in each other. Maybe this was just a phase. But as months passed, it became clear this was not just married life. It was control. Whenever I called, Daniel seemed to be the one answering. "Emily's busy right now, Rosalind," he'd say smoothly. "She'll call you back later." But she rarely did. When I texted Emily directly, responses came hours, sometimes days later. And when she did reply, her messages were brief, as though she were afraid Daniel might be watching. The most painful part was how subtle it all was. Daniel never raised his voice at me, never said anything overtly cruel. Instead, he chipped away at my place in Emily's life with small, deliberate actions. If I invited them to dinner, he'd say they already had plans. If I suggested visiting, he'd mention how overwhelmed Emily was. I started to feel like I was intruding on my own daughter's life. One Sunday afternoon, desperate to see her, I decided to take a chance. I baked Emily's favorite lemon cookies, something that had always made her light up, and stopped by their apartment unannounced. When Emily opened the door, her face lit up. "Mom, what a surprise." We sat on the couch sharing cookies and chatting about her new job. For a brief moment, I felt hope. Maybe things weren't as bad as I feared. Then the door opened and Daniel stepped in. He froze when he saw me, his smile flickering for just a second. "Oh, Rosalind, I didn't know we had company today." "I just brought some cookies for Emily," I said lightly, holding up the tin. Daniel walked over, kissed Emily on the cheek, and said, "Next time, maybe text first." "We've had a long day." Emily's smile faltered. "It's fine, Daniel. Mom just wanted to visit." Daniel's expression softened, but I saw the flash of irritation in his eyes. That tiny moment told me everything he hadn't expected me to come without permission. As I left that evening, Emily hugged me tightly. "Thanks for coming, Mom. I miss you." I held her close, swallowing back tears. "I miss you too, sweetheart." But deep down, I knew Daniel would make sure moments like this became rarer. A week later, I got my proof. I had stopped by again, this time to drop off an invitation for a family friend's birthday party. Emily was getting ready in the bedroom, and Daniel was in the kitchen on the phone. "She's too involved, Emily," he said sharply, his voice low but firm. "You need to grow up. If you want our marriage to work, you can't keep running to your mom for everything." I froze in the hallway, my chest tightening. Emily didn't respond right away. I could feel the weight of her silence. Daniel continued. We're a family now. She needs to learn her place. When he left the room, Emily looked at me, guilt written all over her face. Mom, he just thinks we need boundaries. Boundaries. The word felt like a slap. That night, I sat in my quiet living room staring at the framed photos of Emily growing up, her first ballet recital, her graduation the day she got her first job. And something inside me shifted. For months, I'd held back, telling myself it wasn't my place to interfere. But watching Emily fade under Daniel's influence made me realize that silence was no longer an option. I didn't lash out. I didn't argue. Instead, I decided to do something Daniel would never expect. I would wait, I would watch, and I would be ready to act when the time came. The turning point came one late evening months after that uncomfortable hallway encounter. I had been trying to keep some form of connection with Emily, occasional texts, short calls when Daniel wasn't around, but it was obvious my daughter was slipping further and further away. Every time I spoke to her, she sounded muted, as though part of her vibrant personality had been dimmed. She laughed less, shared less. Even the way she spoke felt rehearsed, like she was always measuring her words. Then one night I stopped by to drop off some mail that had been delivered to my house by mistake. I wasn't planning to stay, but as I walked up the hallway I heard voices, Daniel's voice sharp and cold, carrying through the door. She needs to stop calling you so much, Emily. You're married now. You don't need her approval for everything. Emily's voice was small. She's my mom, Daniel. I don't want to hurt her. You're not hurting her. You're setting boundaries. If she can't respect that, then maybe she doesn't need to be such a big part of our lives. The words hit me like a knife. My daughter didn't respond, and that silence was more painful than anything Daniel had said. I knocked on the door, and Emily quickly opened it. Her eyes widened when she saw me. Mom, I didn't know you were coming by. Daniel appeared behind her, his face carefully neutral. Rosalind, dropping something off again. Yes, I said calmly, handing Emily the envelope. Some mail came to my house by mistake. Daniel's smile didn't reach his eyes. Well, thanks for bringing it. I left without saying more, but inside, my emotions were a storm. That night, sitting in my living room, I realized something terrifying. Daniel wasn't just isolating Emily from me. He was reshaping how she thought about our relationship. If I confronted him directly, I would lose her completely. He'd paint me as controlling, and she'd believe him. So I did the one thing Daniel wouldn't expect. I went quiet. I stopped calling as much. I let Emily be the one to reach out, even if it meant waiting days for a text that said nothing more than, "Hope you're well." But while I seemed distant, I was paying close attention. I started to notice patterns: how Daniel always took her phone when she wasn't looking, how he dismissed her opinions in conversations, how he made small jokes at her expense that weren't really jokes at all. Whenever I was with them, I began mentally noting everything: his tone, his words, even the way Emily flinched slightly when he put a hand on her shoulder. I started saving every text he sent me, every short clipped message where he pretended to be Emily. Then one afternoon, I overheard something that confirmed everything I feared. I was standing by the doorway of a cafe waiting for my coffee when I saw Daniel outside on the phone. He didn't see me. "Don't worry about her," he was saying to someone. "Emily won't have time for her mom once the baby comes. She'll be too busy. Besides, I've already got her thinking Rosalind is too overbearing. It's just a matter of time. A baby." Emily hadn't even told me she was pregnant. I felt my chest tighten, my breath catching in my throat. Daniel wasn't just cutting me out. He was planning to remove me from my grandchild's life before it even began. When I got home that night, I sat in my armchair staring at the quiet, empty room around me. My mind was racing. I realized that if I didn't act soon, I would lose Emily forever. But I also knew Daniel was smart. If I confronted him openly, he'd twist everything, making Emily believe I was the problem. No, I had to be strategic. I decided to let Daniel think he'd won, that I was stepping back, giving them space. Meanwhile, I would gather everything I needed. I started saving texts, emails, and even little moments of disrespect I could describe in detail. I also reached out to a trusted friend, a lawyer who had helped me years ago with estate planning. "I need advice," I told her quietly over the phone. Not legal action. Not yet. But I think my daughter's husband is trying to manipulate her into cutting me out completely. She listened patiently, then said, Rosalind, this is about control. If you fight openly, you'll lose. But if you wait, if you get proof, he'll ruin himself without realizing it. That night, for the first time in months, I slept with a strange sense of calm. Because Daniel had made one fatal mistake. He underestimated me. After that night, everything changed for me. Outwardly, I played the role Daniel expected, the quiet, distant mother who had finally accepted boundaries. I called less, visited less, and when I did see them, I kept my words soft and agreeable. Daniel looked almost smug in those moments, as though my silence confirmed his victory. But what he didn't know was that every time we interacted, I was taking mental notes. I started writing everything down in a small leather-bound notebook. Dates, times, exact words he said, and how Emily reacted. It wasn't just about having proof. It was about reminding myself that I wasn't imagining things. Little by little, the notebook filled with entries. Feb 14, Valentine's dinner. Daniel ordered Emily's food without asking her what she wanted. Feb 27. Daniel took Emily's phone mid-conversation, told me she was busy when she wasn't. Mar 3. Emily texted me, but the message was clearly typed by Daniel short cold, not her tone. The more I wrote, the more patterns emerged. Daniel wasn't just controlling, he was methodical. But my quiet observation paid off in a way I never expected. One afternoon, Emily stopped by my house alone. She hadn't done that in months. She looked pale, tired, and anxious, like the spark in her eyes had dimmed completely. Mom, she said softly, sitting at my kitchen table. Daniel says you think he's trying to keep me away from you. That's not true, is it? I felt my chest tighten. He was turning her against me directly now. I reached across the table and took her hand. Emily, you're my daughter. I would never try to take you away from anyone. I just want you to be happy. She smiled weakly, but I could tell she didn't believe me, not fully. Daniel had gotten to her. After she left, I sat in the kitchen long after the tea had gone cold, staring at the door she'd just walked through. I realized that Daniel was winning. If I didn't do something soon, Emily would eventually believe every poisonous word he whispered about me. That night, I called my old friend Lydia, the lawyer I trusted more than anyone. Lydia, I said quietly, I need your help. Not legal action yet, but I need to know my options. I need to know how to protect Emily and my grandchild from him. Lydia didn't hesitate. Start gathering evidence. If he's controlling finances, get proof. If he's isolating her, document it. Because one day, Rosalind, you'll need to show her exactly who he is. Her words lit a fire in me. From then on, I became even more careful. I started discreetly saving every voicemail, every text, every email. When I visited, I noticed how Daniel often hovered nearby, listening in. I pretended not to notice, but I was memorizing every detail, his tone, his expressions, even how Emily's body language shifted when he was near. One evening, I had dinner with my neighbor Grace, who had always been blunt about her dislike of Daniel. I've seen men like him before, she said as we sipped tea on her porch. They start charming, then isolate. Next comes financial control. Her words stuck with me. That night, I decided to dig deeper, not just into Daniel's behavior, but into his past. Through a few old connections and some quiet online searching, I learned that Daniel had been married once before. His ex-wife had filed for divorce, citing emotional abuse and financial manipulation. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. Everything I had feared was true. But this wasn't just about me anymore. Emily was pregnant, vulnerable, and tied to this man in a way that could trap her for life. As much as I wanted to run to her with everything I knew, I stopped myself. Daniel was clever. If Emily thought I was attacking her husband, she'd shut me out completely. No, I needed proof, undeniable proof. And I needed the perfect moment to use it. So I waited. I stayed quiet, polite, agreeable. Because sometimes the strongest thing a woman can do is wait for the right moment to strike. And deep down, I knew that moment was coming. The following weeks became a careful dance of patience and planning. Outwardly, I maintained my silence, playing the role Daniel expected of me, the subdued, accommodating mother who had finally learned her place. I called less, visited less, and whenever we met, I smiled and agreed with whatever he said. Daniel seemed almost pleased with himself. He would glance at me during family dinners with a smug expression, as though he had finally tamed me. But behind that facade, I was documenting everything. My notebook had become my weapon, filled with dates, times, and exact quotes. It wasn't just cathartic, it was my insurance policy. I wrote down every controlling remark, every dismissive comment, every instance where Emily's voice seemed replaced by his. At the same time, I grew closer to Grace, my neighbor. Over cups of tea, we would talk about life, but inevitably the conversation returned to Daniel. "You're not crazy," Rosalind Grace told me firmly one afternoon. "I've seen him in town. The way he talks to her, it's like she's a child, not a wife." Her words validated my instincts. Grace had sharp eyes and she'd noticed things I hadn't. How Daniel always walked slightly ahead of Emily. How he'd answer questions for her when they were in public. Then one evening, Grace said something that would change everything. "You know, I used to work with his ex-wife." She never talked much about him, but when she finally left, she was broken. Said he drained her emotionally and financially. My stomach dropped. After Grace left that night, I couldn't shake the thought. I searched public records and found the divorce filing. The words were chilling. Emotional manipulation, financial coercion, isolation from family. It was like reading a blueprint of what Daniel was doing to Emily. But knowing wasn't enough. I needed undeniable proof. Over the next few weeks, I began saving everything. Screenshots of texts that were clearly written by Daniel. Bank statements Emily had once accidentally left at my house that showed large, unexplained transfers to Daniel's personal account. Voicemails where Daniel explained why Emily couldn't come to the phone. Each piece of evidence was a puzzle piece, and I was slowly putting them together. Then came the moment that solidified my resolve. One Saturday, Emily stopped by unexpectedly. She looked pale, tired, and smaller somehow, like the life had been drained out of her. "Mom," she said softly, sitting at my table. "Daniel thinks you're too involved. He says you don't respect our space." I took her hand. "Emily, I've never wanted anything but your happiness. If you need space, I'll give it. But I hope you know I'll always be here for you." Her eyes softened for a moment, but she said nothing more. When she left, I realized just how deep Daniel's manipulation ran. Emily was defending him even as he pushed her away from me. That night, I made a decision. I would protect my daughter and my future grandchild at any cost. I contacted Lydia, my lawyer friend, again. "It's worse than I thought," I told her. "Then we planned," she said simply. "You wait until the perfect moment when there's no denying what he's done." Her words became my mantra. In the meantime, I started preparing quietly. I opened a secure folder on my computer for all my evidence. I even recorded one of our phone calls, Daniel's voice curtly saying, "She doesn't need to know about the baby yet. She'll just meddle." Every time I saved another piece of evidence, I felt a surge of strength. Because Daniel thought he was winning. He thought my silence meant defeat. But in reality, I was arming myself patiently, carefully, methodically. And soon I would be ready to strike. By the time spring arrived, my notebook was almost full. Each page was another reminder of Daniel's quiet cruelty, the subtle digs, the controlling gestures, the way Emily had become a shadow of herself. But I also knew that my word alone wouldn't be enough. Daniel was too clever, too careful. If I tried to confront him without undeniable proof, he would twist the story, convincing Emily I was just a bitter, overbearing mother who couldn't let go. That was when Grace became more than just a friend. She became an ally. Grace had known Daniel's ex-wife from years ago. One afternoon, as we sat on her porch with tea, she told me something that made my blood run cold. "Her name is Laura," Grace said. "When she left him, she told me she'd lost everything, her savings, her friends, her confidence. He isolated her from everyone who cared about her, just like he's doing to Emily." "Do you know where she is now?" I asked. Grace nodded. "She moved 2 towns over. I could reach out to her if you want." I hesitated for a moment. Contacting Laura felt like crossing a line, but this wasn't just about me anymore. Emily was pregnant, vulnerable, and bound to a man who had already destroyed one woman's life. "Please," I said finally, "see if she's willing to talk." A few days later, Grace called. "She'll meet us. She said she wishes someone had warned her before it was too late." The following Saturday, we met Laura at a quiet cafe. She was a slender woman in her early 40s, her eyes tired but kind. When she saw me, she reached out and squeezed my hand. "I'm so sorry," she said softly. "If he's doing to your daughter what he did to me, you need to be careful." Laura told me everything: how Daniel had charmed her family at first, then slowly isolated her from everyone. How he took control of their finances, made decisions without her input, and convinced her she was incapable of managing her own life. "By the time I realized what he was doing, I had nothing left," Laura said. "He left me with debts I didn't even know I had." She slid a small envelope across the table. "These are copies of some of our old financial records. I don't know if they'll help, but I don't want anyone else to go through what I did." I held the envelope like it was a lifeline. That night, I went through the papers. The similarities were chilling: large transfers to Daniel's personal accounts, unexplained credit card charges, loans taken out in Laura's name. I compared them to the bank statements Emily had accidentally left at my house months ago. The patterns were nearly identical. Daniel wasn't just isolating Emily. He was financially draining her, just like he had done to Laura. With Laura's help, I now had something concrete: proof of a repeated pattern of manipulation. But I still needed the right moment. I couldn't simply show Emily the evidence. Daniel had her so tightly wrapped around his finger that she would defend him, maybe even cut me off completely for meddling. So I waited. I continued to play the role of the quiet, agreeable mother. I smiled when Daniel made smug comments at dinner. I nodded politely when he spoke over Emily. But inside, I was stronger than ever. Because now I wasn't just waiting for him to slip up, I was preparing for the day when I would pull the ground out from under his feet. And that day was coming sooner than he thought. One evening, Emily called me for the first time in weeks. Her voice was shaky. "Mom, Daniel wants to make some changes to our accounts. He says it'll be easier if everything's under his name for now. Do you think that's a good idea?" I felt my heart pound, but I forced my voice to stay calm. "Sweetheart, you're an adult. You have to make your own choices. But whatever you do, make sure you understand everything before you sign." There was a long pause. "I will. Thanks, Mom." When I hung up, I knew. Daniel was getting greedy, and greedy men always leave a trail. The call from Emily haunted me for days. The fact that Daniel wanted everything in his name confirmed my worst fears. He wasn't just trying to control her, he was preparing to trap her financially. I knew this was the moment I had been waiting for. His greed was about to be his undoing. The next week, Emily stopped by my house. She looked exhausted, her usual glow replaced with a kind of quiet resignation. She held a stack of papers in her hand. "Daniel wants me to sign these," she said softly, sitting at my kitchen table. "He says it's just easier if everything's under his name until after the baby's born. He says it'll protect me from stress." I kept my voice calm. "Did you read all of it?" Emily shook her head. "Not really. I trust him." The words broke my heart. My daughter, once so independent and vibrant, was now second-guessing herself, unable to see the man manipulating her. "Sweetheart," I said gently, "why don't you let me look at these before you sign? Just so you're sure." She hesitated, then nodded. "Okay. But don't tell Daniel I showed you. He hates when I involve you in our decisions." When she left, I went straight to my desk and read every page. It was worse than I thought. The papers essentially gave Daniel full control of Emily's accounts, her assets, even her future inheritance. It was a financial noose disguised as convenience. I scanned every page, saving copies into the secure folder I had built over months. Then I called Lydia. "This is it," I told her. "He's trying to take everything." Lydia listened as I explained the situation. "Rosalind, you have more than enough proof now. But you can't just show Emily the papers. He'll spin it. You need a moment where he exposes himself in front of her." As if the universe was listening, that moment came sooner than I expected. 2 days later, Emily called me in tears. "Mom, we had a fight." Daniel said. "He said I was acting stupid for not signing the papers yet. He said you were just filling my head with doubts." I took a deep breath. "Emily, can you come over tomorrow? I just want to talk." The next day, Emily arrived with the papers. She sat at my table, her hands trembling. "I don't know what to do. He gets so angry when I hesitate." I reached across and held her hands. Emily, I'm going to show you something. But you have to promise me you'll keep an open mind. She looked at me nervously but nodded. I opened my laptop and pulled up the folder. One by one, I showed her the evidence screenshots of texts Daniel had sent pretending to be her copies of bank statements, showing money transfers, and, finally, Laura's divorce documents. "This is what he did to his ex-wife," I said softly. "And this is what he's trying to do to you." Emily's face went pale as she read the papers. This can't be real." He wouldn't. "Sweetheart," I said gently, "you already feel it. You've felt it for months. This is who he is." Tears welled in her eyes. I didn't want to believe it. I hugged her tightly, my heart breaking for her. "You don't have to decide what to do right now. But promise me you won't sign those papers." She nodded slowly, her hands clutching mine. That night after she left, I felt a strange mix of relief and dread. Because while Emily finally saw the truth, Daniel wasn't going to let go easily. And I knew deep in my gut that things were about to get ugly. The next week felt like the calm before a storm. Emily hadn't signed the papers, but she also hadn't confronted Daniel about what she'd learned. She was processing, and I didn't push her. I knew how difficult it was to accept that the man you loved had been deceiving you all along. But Daniel must have sensed the shift. 3 days later, Emily called me late at night. Her voice was trembling. "Mom, he found out I didn't sign. He's furious. He said you're trying to ruin our marriage." "Where is he now?" I asked sharply. "He left. Said he needed to cool off." Mom, I'm scared." I gripped the phone tightly. "Emily, listen to me. You're not alone. Come here. Pack a bag if you need to, but don't be there when he gets back." An hour later, Emily arrived at my house, eyes red and swollen. She collapsed into my arms, sobbing. "I can't believe I didn't see it," she whispered. "How could I be so blind?" "You loved him," I said softly. "That's not weakness. That's trust." And he took advantage of it. For the next 2 days, Emily stayed with me. Daniel called constantly, sometimes apologizing, sometimes raging. She didn't answer. During that time, I met with Lydia again. We went through every piece of evidence: my notes, screenshots, Laura's documents, the unsigned papers. "This is more than enough to protect Emily," Lydia said. "But you need to be careful. If you humiliate him outright, he might lash out in ways you can't predict. The safest way is to expose him publicly somewhere he can't twist the story." It was risky, but it was the only way to make Emily see the full truth. 2 nights later, Emily decided to meet Daniel for dinner. "Mom, I need to talk to him," she said. "I need to hear what he says for myself." "I'll come," I told her. "Not to interfere, just to listen." We chose a quiet family restaurant. Daniel arrived looking polished as always, but there was an edge to his smile, a tension beneath the charm. "Emily," he said smoothly, ignoring me, "I just don't understand why you're listening to your mother. We're supposed to be a team." Emily's voice was steady, though her hands trembled slightly. "A team doesn't hide things from each other. A team doesn't drain accounts behind someone's back." Daniel's smile faltered for the briefest second. "I don't know what she's told you, but—" "She didn't tell me," Emily interrupted. "I saw it. I saw everything." The color drained from Daniel's face. You don't understand." I slid a folder across the table. "She understands perfectly, Daniel. These are copies of the accounts. And this," I pulled out Laura's documents. "This is what you did to your ex-wife." For a moment, the mask slipped completely. Daniel's eyes hardened, his jaw tightening. "You had no right." "I had every right," Emily said, her voice shaking but strong. "You tried to take everything from me, and you tried to take me from my mom." Daniel's face flushed red. "You're pathetic," he spat. "You can't make a decision without her holding your hand." Every person in the restaurant turned to look at us. Daniel realized too late that he'd just revealed exactly who he was. Emily stood, her hands trembling but steady. "We're done." When we left, Daniel stayed behind, too stunned to follow. As we walked to the car, Emily clutched my hand. "Thank you," she whispered. "For waiting. For letting me see it myself." I hugged her tightly. "You saw it when you were ready. That's what matters." But deep down, I knew this wasn't over. Daniel wasn't the kind of man to walk away quietly. And while Emily was finally free, I was prepared for whatever he tried next, because this time we weren't alone. The night after that dinner, Emily stayed at my house again. She was quiet, processing everything that had just happened. I didn't press her to talk. Sometimes silence can be more healing than words. But Daniel didn't stay silent for long. The next morning, Emily's phone buzzed with message after message. Apologies, excuses, desperate pleas to talk. He even sent flowers to my house with a note that read, "Please tell Emily to come home. We can fix this." Emily read the messages with shaking hands. "He just doesn't get it," she whispered. "That's because men like him don't think they've done anything wrong," I told her. "They think control is love. And when they lose that control, they panic." 2 days later, Daniel showed up at my house. I saw his car pull into the driveway and my stomach tightened. He stepped out immaculate as always, holding a bouquet of roses. "Rosalind," he said smoothly, "I just want to talk to Emily. I think we can work this out." I opened the door halfway. "She doesn't want to see you right now." He smiled, but his eyes were cold. "This isn't your decision to make. It's hers," I said firmly. Emily appeared behind me, her face pale but resolute. "Daniel, I don't want to talk. Not now. Maybe not ever. Please leave." For a moment, I saw something flash across his face. Anger pure and unfiltered. But then the mask slipped back on and he nodded. "Fine," he said softly. "If that's how you want it." He turned and walked away, but I knew this wasn't the end. That night, Emily sat with me at the kitchen table. "Mom, I want to get out of this marriage. But I'm scared. I don't even know what's legally mine anymore." "That's why we have Lydia," I said, squeezing her hand. "She'll help us. And this time you won't go through it alone." Over the next week, we met with Lydia several times. We went through every bank statement, every text, every piece of evidence I had collected. Lydia built a case so strong that even Daniel wouldn't be able to twist it. But Lydia also gave Emily advice that surprised her. "You don't need to confront him again. Let the papers speak for you. Men like him always think they can talk their way out of anything. Don't give him that chance." Emily nodded, her jaw tightening with determination I hadn't seen in months. And then came the night that sealed Daniel's fate. Emily invited him to a family dinner at my house. Daniel arrived smiling as though nothing had happened. When we all sat down, Emily slid a folder across the table. "What's this?" he asked, opening it. "Divorce papers," Emily said, her voice steady. Daniel laughed, a hollow, incredulous sound. "You're joking." "I'm not," Emily said calmly. "I know everything, Daniel. The accounts, the lies, the way you tried to cut me off from my own mother." His eyes darted to me, cold and furious. "You did this." "No," I said softly. "You did this to yourself." For the first time, Daniel didn't have a clever reply. He just sat there, his hands tightening on the papers, his face pale. Emily stood up. "You can leave now. We're done." Daniel's mask cracked then. "You'll regret this," he hissed, his voice low and venomous. But Emily didn't flinch. "No, Daniel. I'll finally have my life back." He left without another word, slamming the door behind him. That night, as Emily and I sat on the couch together, she leaned her head on my shoulder. "Mom," she whispered, "thank you for waiting, for not forcing me to see it before I was ready." Tears filled my eyes as I kissed the top of her head. "You saw him for who he really was. That's all I wanted." But I knew Daniel well enough to understand that he wouldn't go quietly. And as much as Emily had taken her power back, I still had one final card to play, one last step to make sure Daniel could never hurt her again. Daniel didn't disappear after that dinner. If anything, his attempts to get Emily back became more desperate and more dangerous. At first, it was constant messages. Long apologies, promises to change, even pictures of the flowers he sent to her workplace. When Emily didn't respond, his tone shifted. "You'll regret this. You're throwing everything away. Your mom turned you against me. She's jealous of us." Each message was another reminder of why she had left him. Lydia had advised Emily not to reply. "The more he talks, the more evidence we have of his instability," she explained. But then Daniel began showing up, at her workplace, at the grocery store. Once he even sat in his car across the street from my house for nearly an hour. Emily grew anxious, barely sleeping at night. "Mom, what if he tries to take the baby?" she whispered one evening, her hand on her stomach. I took her hand and looked her in the eye. "He won't. I promise you that." That was the night I made my final move. The next morning, I called Laura Daniels' ex-wife. She had been following everything closely and had offered to testify if needed. "You have everything you need," she told me. "You don't just have my story, you have a pattern, a history. He can't hide from that." I thanked her, tears welling in my eyes. "You're saving my daughter's life," Laura sighed. "I just wish someone had saved mine." That week, Lydia filed the divorce paperwork attaching all the evidence we had gathered. Screenshots, bank records, Laura's testimony. It was airtight. But Daniel still believed he could talk his way out of it. When he was served with the papers, he stormed to my house the same evening. "You think you've won?" he hissed as I opened the door. "This isn't over." I stood my ground, calm and steady. "It is, Daniel. You just don't know it yet." Behind me, Emily stepped into the doorway, holding her phone up, recording every word. Daniel froze, realizing too late that he had walked straight into our trap. "You can leave now," Emily said firmly. "Next time you show up here, it'll be the police answering the door, not us." For the first time, Daniel looked truly defeated. He turned and walked away without another word. 2 weeks later, we sat in Lydia's office as she reviewed the final steps. "He has no chance of contesting this," she said, tapping the folder in front of her. "His history, his actions, the evidence, it's all here. Emily, you're going to be free." Emily exhaled deeply, tears streaming down her face. "I didn't think I'd ever get here." "You did it," I said softly, holding her hand. "You saved yourself." But Emily shook her head. "No, Mom, you saved me. You never gave up on me even when I couldn't see what he was doing." I smiled, my heart swelling with both pride and relief. Sometimes the best way to fight back is to wait until the other person destroys themselves. Daniel just handed us everything we needed. A month later, the divorce was finalized. Daniel didn't show up to court that day. Maybe he was too humiliated. Maybe he had finally realized he had lost. As we left the courthouse, Emily turned to me. "I can't believe it's finally over." "It's not over," I said gently. "It's the beginning. You're free now. You get to build the life you deserve with your baby, with people who love you for who you are." Emily hugged me tightly. "I don't know what I would have done without you." "You would have found your strength," I said softly. "But I'm glad I was here to remind you you've always had it." For the first time in months, I saw her smile, the real, unfiltered smile I thought Daniel had taken from her forever. And in that moment, I knew he would never control her again. In the days following the court hearing, life began to feel lighter for both Emily and me. She moved back into her own apartment, one she could finally call her own, without Daniel hovering over every decision. I helped her decorate, bringing over little touches from her childhood home. Framed photos, the quilt her grandmother had made, a few of her favorite books that had been sitting on my shelves for years. There was still pain, of course. The end of any relationship, especially one that was built on manipulation, left scars. Emily struggled with guilt. "Mom," she said one evening as we unpacked boxes, "I keep thinking, why didn't I see it? Why did I let him do this to me?" I put my arms around her. "Because you loved him. And love makes us believe the best in people." "That's not weakness, Emily. That's being human. The only shame would have been staying once you saw the truth." She nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. I feel like I wasted so much time." "You didn't waste it," I said softly. "You learned, and now you'll never let anyone treat you that way again." But Daniel wasn't done trying to get to her. He sent letters, long rambling apologies mixed with veiled threats. "We belong together," one read. Another said, "You can't keep me out of my child's life forever." Emily was terrified every time a letter arrived. "Do you think he'll try to fight for custody?" she asked one night. "He might," I admitted. "But Lydia's prepared for that. With his history and everything we've documented, any judge will see through him. You and your baby will be safe." Still, I could see the fear in her eyes. That fear was what pushed me to take one final step. Through Laura Daniels' ex-wife, I discovered that he was already in serious debt. His previous divorce had drained him financially, and his reputation wasn't as clean as he liked to portray. There were whispers in town about shady deals and unpaid loans. I decided to dig deeper. Using my network of friends from my nursing days, I quietly reached out to people who knew Daniel through work and business. What I found was damning multiple people he'd borrowed money from investments he'd mismanaged, and a trail of broken promises. I collected statements, emails, and even a recorded voicemail from a former colleague. He ruined me financially. If you trust him, you're a fool. The pieces started to fall into place. Daniel wasn't just manipulative in relationships. He was reckless in every aspect of his life. When I shared what I'd found with Lydia, she smiled for the first time in weeks. Rosalind, this changes everything. If he even tries for custody, we can bury him in evidence of his irresponsibility. He'll lose any claim before it starts. Emily cried when she heard. Mom, how did you do all of this? I smiled gently, because I refused to let him win. You're my daughter, and I won't let anyone take you or my grandchild from me. Finally, we took one last step. We had Lydia send Daniel a formal letter detailing every piece of evidence we had against him. It was a warning in plain words that any attempt to challenge custody or harass Emily further would end in complete legal destruction. The message was clear. We are not afraid of you anymore. Weeks went by and the letters stopped. The calls stopped. Even Daniel's car stopped appearing outside my house. It was as if he had finally realized he had lost and that we had won. One sunny afternoon, Emily and I sat together in her apartment, now fully unpacked and filled with warmth again. She rested a hand on her growing belly. You saved me, she said softly. I shook my head. No, Emily, you saved yourself. I just stood beside you until you remembered how strong you really are. For the first time in a long time, I saw the daughter I used to know, the confident, independent woman Daniel had tried to erase. She smiled through tears. I don't know what I would have done without you. You would have found your way back, I said, squeezing her hand. But I'm glad I could help you get there sooner. And in that moment, I realized something powerful. Daniel thought silence meant weakness. But silence was what gave me the strength to see clearly, to gather proof, and to wait for the perfect moment to act. Sometimes the quietest people are the ones planning the loudest victories. Life slowly began to settle into something resembling peace. Emily was free, her divorce finalized, and for the first time in months, she looked like herself again. Her laughter returned, tentative at first, then stronger with each passing day. But freedom came with its own challenges. Pregnancy had its ups and downs, and Emily was adjusting to single life again. We spent countless afternoons preparing the nursery, painting walls in soft shades of yellow and gray. Each tiny onesie we folded together felt like a quiet triumph, proof that she was reclaiming her life one step at a time. Yet I knew healing wasn't just about moving forward. It was about making sure Daniel could never come back. I still remembered Lydia's words clearly. Men like him rarely give up control. He may stay quiet for a while, but he'll always be looking for a way back in, unless you close every door. So that's exactly what we did. Working with Lydia, we filed legal motions to secure Emily's finances and protect her assets. We made sure Daniel couldn't touch a single penny of her money or future inheritance. We also set up custody arrangements ahead of time, papers that ensured he'd have supervised visits only if he ever tried to claim parental rights. Every document we signed, every precaution we took felt like reclaiming another piece of Emily's future. One afternoon, Grace came over to visit. She'd been such an important part of this journey, and I wanted her to see how far Emily had come. You look like yourself again, Grace said warmly, hugging Emily. Emily smiled softly. I finally feel like myself again. Grace turned to me, her eyes glistening. You saved her, Rosalind. You never gave up. I shook my head. I just waited until she was ready to see the truth. That was the hardest part, waiting. Grace squeezed my hand. That's what makes you strong. You let him think he was winning, but you were planning the whole time. A week later, Daniel sent one final message, short, bitter, and full of venom. You'll regret this. You're nothing without me. Emily looked at the message, then deleted it without replying. I'm done with him, she said simply. For the first time, I believed her completely. As the weeks passed, we began to focus on the future doctor's appointments, baby showers, and late-night conversations about the kind of life Emily wanted to give her child. One night, while we were folding tiny baby clothes, Emily looked at me and said, Mom, I don't know what kind of man my child's father is going to grow up to be, but I do know the kind of woman I want them to become, someone like you. Strong, patient, someone who never stops fighting for the people they love. Her words brought tears to my eyes. Emily, you're already that woman. You just needed to remember who you were. When the baby shower arrived, it felt like a celebration, not just of new life, but of freedom. Friends and family gathered laughing and taking photos, filling the room with warmth and love. As I watched Emily open gifts, tiny shoes, soft blankets, rattles, I realized just how far we had come. The woman sitting there, glowing and smiling, was nothing like the one who had once defended Daniel's every action. She was free. After everyone left, Emily hugged me tightly. "Thank you, Mom, for everything." I kissed her forehead. "You don't need to thank me. You saved yourself. I just stood by you until you found your strength again." That night, as I sat alone in my living room, I thought about everything we had been through. Daniel had tried to erase me from Emily's life to make her forget who she was. But in the end, his manipulation had been his undoing. Because men like Daniel always underestimate women like me. They think silence means defeat. But silence, when used well, is the sharpest weapon of all. Emily went to bed that night, peaceful for the first time in months. I stayed up a little longer, sipping tea, staring at the baby blanket I'd knitted sitting neatly on the arm of the couch. For the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to feel something other than anger or fear. I felt hope. Hope for Emily. Hope for my grandchild. Hope for the life they would have free from Daniel's shadow. And I promised myself that I would always protect them quietly, fiercely, and without hesitation. Because that's what mothers do. The day Emily gave birth to her baby girl felt like a final, unspoken victory. I sat by her side in the hospital, holding her hand as she brought new life into the world. When I heard that first tiny cry, I felt tears roll down my cheeks. Tears of relief, joy, and quiet triumph. Emily held her daughter, her face glowing despite the exhaustion. "Mom," she whispered. "Meet Lily." I looked at the tiny bundle in her arms, her delicate fingers curling instinctively around Emily's thumb. My heart swelled so much it felt like it might burst. "She's perfect," I said softly. Emily smiled through her tears. "She's the reason I'm glad I left Daniel. I didn't want her to grow up thinking that kind of love was normal." I brushed a tear from her cheek. "She's going to grow up knowing exactly what strength looks like because she has you." In the weeks that followed, life finally found a peaceful rhythm. Emily moved into a cozy new apartment near my home. We spent our days taking care of Lily, cooking dinners together, and planning for a future that was finally hers to shape. Daniel, for the most part, stayed silent. Lydia made sure every legal door was closed to him. He had no claim, no power, no way back in. The few bitter messages he tried to send were met with silence. And silence, I realized, was the most powerful answer of all. One afternoon, as Emily rocked Lily to sleep, she turned to me. "Mom, do you ever wish you'd done things differently? That you'd fought louder sooner?" I thought for a long moment. No. If I had yelled, accused, or tried to force you to see the truth, he would have won. You had to see it for yourself. And I had to trust you enough to wait. Emily's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you for not giving up on me." I reached out and squeezed her hand. A mother's love is patient. It doesn't scream. It doesn't demand. It just stays. And when the moment is right, it acts. A month later, we had a small gathering at my house to celebrate Lily's first month. Grace was there along with Laura, who had become like family after everything we'd been through. Laura held Lily gently, her eyes soft. "She's beautiful," she whispered. "I'm so glad Emily got out before it was too late." Emily hugged her. "Thank you for helping my mom help me. I don't know what I would have done without you both." Laura smiled sadly. "I just wish someone had been there for me. But I'm glad I could be there for you." That night, after everyone left, Emily sat with me on the porch watching the stars. "I feel free," she said quietly. "Like I can breathe again." I smiled, tears pricking my eyes. "That's all I ever wanted for you." Sometimes I think back to those months of silence, those long, lonely days when I felt powerless. But I know now that it was in those moments that I became strongest. Because silence isn't weakness. Silence is strategy. It's gathering proof while the other person thinks they've already won. It's choosing the exact right moment to speak and making sure your voice is the last one they ever hear. As I looked at Emily and Lily that night, I felt a profound sense of peace. Daniel had tried to erase me from my daughter's life, but in the end, he had only made us stronger. And for the first time in a long time, I knew we were safe. Safe, free, and finally happy. Because sometimes the sweetest revenge isn't loud or dramatic. Sometimes the sweetest revenge is simply living well surrounded by love, while the person who tried to break you fades quietly into irrelevance. And that was exactly what we had done. Looking back, I realized that everything Daniel did, the charm, the manipulation, the control, was designed to make me doubt myself. He wanted me to react in anger to prove his narrative that I was an overbearing mother. But silence became my greatest weapon. I waited. I watched. And when the time came, I exposed him in a way he couldn't twist or deny. Emily found her strength, and in doing so, she found herself again. That's the thing about manipulation. It only works as long as you don't see it. Once you do, its power evaporates. Daniel thought he had won. He thought my silence meant surrender, but my silence meant strategy. And in the end, we didn't just win, we reclaimed everything he tried to take. Lily will grow up never knowing the kind of man her father really was. She'll know love's safety and the strength of women who refused to be controlled. To anyone listening who has been through something similar, you are not weak for staying silent. You are strong for surviving. And sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is wait until the truth speaks for itself. Have you ever known someone who tried to control or isolate a loved one? What did you do? Share your stories in the comments below. Your voice might give someone else the courage to take back their life. And don't forget to subscribe to Grace's Truth for more powerful emotional stories of resilience and poetic justice.